The U.S. Embassy in Brussels advised American citizens there to shelter in place. Michael Chertoff joins us now on the phone. He was Secretary of Homeland Security under President George W. Bush. Secretary Chertoff, good morning.
Good morning.
The two airport bombs went off in the departure lounge, Mr. Secretary, before people went through security. One of them went off near a Starbucks. Do we need to change airport security at this point and move it back even further, if you would?
Well, I have to say, this is something I've spoken to people about for some time. The actual portion of the airport before the checkpoint is not really controlled by the federal government. It's controlled by the local authorities. And it has increasingly become vulnerable because as people wait to go through security, they actually congregate there. And so now there's an effort, I think, on the part of TSA to start to move the airports into pushing the security envelope out. We've seen some of that in terms of not allowing you to park in front of the terminal, but I think we're going to have to step that up.
What should the U.S. do at this point? What is our position, our reaction?
Well, obviously, first of all, we want to help the Belgians with intelligence sharing. Evidently, there is still a remnants, at least, of this terrorist cell that attacked Paris that may have been precipitated into carrying out the attack because now they're being hunted. In the U.S., I think we have less of an issue, but we saw in San Bernardino that we do have people here who are capable of carrying out attacks. I think you're going to see stepped-up security and explosive detection dogs at transit points, train stations, and airports. It may be we have to bring back in the area of the airport outside the security checkpoint the National Guard or heavier police presence like we did right after 9/11. And there's always a concern about copycats. So I think you're going to see some elevated security over the next weeks.
In fact, Mr. Secretary, NYPD just announced this morning they're going to increase security here in this city, so we can expect to see a larger police presence in the trains and bridges, tunnels, subway stations, and other soft targets in this city.
I think that's correct. I also think, frankly, for Americans traveling overseas, particularly in Europe, they want to have heightened awareness of what's around them. I think there's some speculation that the bombs in the airport may have been aimed at either U.S. air carriers or going to the U.S. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's a cautionary note for all American institutions in Europe to be aware of what their security position is.
Mr. Secretary, if you move the security perimeter back in airports, where do you move it to?
Well, as you've seen, we now do actually restrict the ability to park in front of the airport, and so we've done a fair bit in the entranceway to the airport. Where we have been really a little bit lax has been between the point at which you enter the departure lounge and the point at which you go to the security checkpoint. And without suggesting that you're going to move the checkpoint out to the curb, I think a presence of explosive detection dogs, an increased police presence, a capability to respond immediately if someone winds up doing something in that departure area, I think that those are steps that are prudent, and we're going to start to see more of that.
Secretary Chertoff, we are told, of course, that top U.S. military and Justice Department officials have been briefed on these attacks. The FBI also coordinating with our Belgium counterparts and other U.S. agencies, not only helping them with the situation on the ground there, but probably collecting U.S. intelligence to discover whether anything is of concern here in the United States. It has been suggested by the Republican frontrunner that the borders in the U.S. should be sealed. What's your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, I mean, that would be a gross overreaction, which would actually wind up handicapping our ability to protect ourselves, because people who are going back and forth in order to actually coordinate in security would be hampered in doing that. So that's exactly the wrong answer. One thing, though, that we do, which we ought to keep doing, is monitoring communications between people in let's say, Belgium that are suspected terrorists and people in the U.S. The collection of that metadata has proven to be a very important way of determining whether there could be a follow-on plot here. Look, the bottom line is when you have cancer, you go at it with a scalpel. You don't take a meat axe. And this approach of sealing the border is preposterous.
And on that very question of the metadata, do U.S. law enforcement officials have the capabilities today that they need in order to collect that information?
Well, as you know, the law changed recently, last year, so that the metadata is now held by the telephone companies and not by the government itself. And one of the challenges is to make sure that there is a platform that allows the rapid assessment of whether there's a metadata connection when it's in the hands of the telephone companies. I think that is a little bit challenging. I think we're in good shape, but I think we can get in better shape. And this, to me, underscores the importance of building that capability and implementing it as quickly as possible.
Once again, this debate and discussion continues about that collection there. Secretary Chertoff, thank you.
We thank you for your time this morning.